part 2 of The Intruder. The worst part of this was that nothing seemed to fit into any pattern I could discern. If someone else had indeed been trying to enter my mind, as evidenced by the chip door slamming against my wrought iron protection, how did they get there? Did they know that they were intruding upon my mind space? Or had the door shown up for them as well out of nowhere and they were trying to figure it out as well? What would happen if they appeared while I was in there? Or if they had been here when I entered? I was scared. I was angry. Who was my intruder? Why were they disturbing my peace? Why had they shown up on the most private and emotional level of my palace? I entered my pillow punching room in a whirlwind of emotions and went to the weapon wall. I needed to release my frustrations, and faceless victims were perfect for this, as I plucked an aluminum bat from the wall and rounded it into the center of the room, where I began attacking the supplied victim in earnest. Though it had no mouth, it still made noises, whimpers, and grunts of pain, sharp escalations if I hit it in the chest. I was raging over this creation, imagining it to be the invader. I beat it while its bones cracked, crushed its kneecaps, and had it cowering on the ground below me as I raised the bat to cave in its head. I stopped myself in disgust. I had vented out my rage on mental contrast, and with more violence than I had ever used before. I threw the bat aside, and the room returned to its normal state. The thought of going into the bedroom to ruminate over the things felt tainted for me. So I brought myself up from my meditations and decided that a melatonin would probably be a good thing for me, to let my subconscious once again process things for itself. Perhaps it would see what I was missing. That was the last night my dreams were again of doors, shadowy figures slipping around corners, and the overpowering sense of tobacco and liquor. There were a few faces that flickered by, but none that I could recognize, so quite quickly they raced across my mind. I found myself unsure of what I should do next. I made a note of new things I had seen and smelled in a room, as well as its potential change of dimensions. Again, there is nothing in the room that is unfamiliar to me in general, but there is something there that I had put into my mind. When I walk through my rooms, objects resonate with tendrils of memories reaching out towards me. In there they are all obscure, nothing standing out. If they resonate with anything, it was unease. I believe I should attempt to touch one of the objects to see if doing so creates a new sense of what they are. I hadn't wanted to before, as having someone touch my thoughts seemed obscene. But this room refused to leave, and it was causing me much more distress. I know how I must sound speaking of this as though it were an actual physical place, frightening, fighting with fragments of my imagination, fearing for my control over my mind, in case something could manage to break into the imaginary place. It all sounds absurd, but I spent so long on this, perhaps too much time devoted to its construction, and used it as so often. To me, it was as real as any other place in the world. Perhaps so in some cases. It is an extension of me, and it has some sort of cancer growing in it that I need to rid myself of. The palace changes itself as things in my life change, but also always in ways that are understandable. Subtitle: I must recheck everything again, note any changes that have taken place, and make sure that there are no more secret doors hiding in the back of the hallway or nook. After I have lunch today, I will prepare myself for a complete inventory again of my palace, and then I shall notify you of my results. I have returned. I am more frightened now than I can remember being in my life. I now know who the intruder is, as well as why and how they were able to make their way into my palace. And I am terrified that it could happen again. I shall explain, but forgive me if my explanation is less than completely coherent. You will understand my terror before I am finished. I again began with a curious check through all of my rooms and galleries that I had previously established. Again found nothing amiss. I braced myself and descended into the basement. When I came across the door, that evidence of whoever or whatever was behind it trying to break through was more pronounced. The handle had broken from the door, and larger chunks of wood were on the floor from its assault upon the wrought iron bars caging it in. There were scratches upon the wrought iron, as well as though someone had been clawing at it, trying to force it open from behind the wreck of what was left of the wooden door. I peered through one of the large openings and saw that the room was still in its foreign state, though it looked different than it had the last time I was there. I opened the outer door and then the wooden one, firm in my resolve to do whatever I must to solve the mystery of this place. Entering the room, it appeared as though its creator had thrown a fit. The shelves had fallen from the walls, and the small tables were cracked to the floor, with the items they had been displaying strewn about the place. The scent of whiskey and cigarettes was still prominent, while a top note of gasoline rounded off the oil factory assault. I jumped as I heard whimpers and turned to find who was in the room with me, but there was no one. It appeared as though sound had finally been added as well. Whimpers, a slight scraping, the crack of wood from above now joined the rest of the canopy of the siege within my mind. I nearly bolted from the room. Panic began to set in, and I swallowed back the sour taste of bile as I closed my eyes and tried to breathe my way into more collected state. After a few minutes, I was as together as I was going to get. I approached some of the debris on the floor, with the intent of picking it up and seeing what had happened, what would happen. This would freak me out. The first thing I found was the book, fumbling a bit due to the foreignness of the sensation. I knelt on the floor and plucked it from its place. As soon as I made contact with it, a face flashed in my mind. This was Jeremy's book. I remembered him leading discussions about it to anyone who would listen. When we were all out together, that had been nearly 20 years ago, it was a hazy part of my past that I've always blamed the liquor for losing track of. Jeremy, Andy, Joanna, Leslie, and the rest of the crowd. We were a group at one point, spending most of our time together, drinking coffee or booze, and playing at being intellectuals. I couldn't remember why we stopped spending time together. I assumed it was one of those things that where people just drift apart. I had gotten a new job and my schedule changed, life changed. But why was the book in here? Why did it make me remember? I threw it back on the floor, unsure of whether that was an actual memory or if it was simply my association with book and enhanced by all of the witchery taking place in this room. I looked for something else. The piece of folded paper lay there just past the book. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a missing persons flyer. It was of Dana. I had forgotten about her as well, nearly entirely. I never had cared for her. She was Jeremy's girlfriend for a time, but we hadn't gotten along. Glancing around, I noticed that there was a hair tie laying a few feet away. Was the same one that she was wearing in the picture. She had never been found. I remembered that she was one of a number of girls that went missing that year. None of them were ever found. That was probably another thing that had been a part of breaking up our little group. No one knew how to act about it. It was beginning to feel as though this was the purpose behind this room. I had no idea who would be trying to force that year into the forefront of my mind, but the possibility that it was the person behind the missing girls was a troubling one. How they had found me, more importantly, why. The only one I had known was Dana, and as I said, we were never close. I put the flyer down and walked over to the chair. The pack of Camel Wides lay on the ground near the lighter, thrown from their previous perch. I decided it was now or never. When I picked up the lighter, I got a flash of another face, Stefan. It nearly sent me reeling. Stefan had always been odd. He wasn't so much a part of our group as he was on the periphery, present, but not really included in our activities unless we were out at the bar. He wasn't generally invited to the gatherings at people's homes. I had no idea what had happened to him, so we all drifted apart. The lighter was something he used to play with, a nervous habit of tricks that were time to master. I picked up the pack of camels as well. I got a flash of Stefan again. This time it came with an old house. It was abandoned, decently far out in the woods. I remembered him taking me out there once when we'd all been drunk. I think it was the only time I'd been alone with him. Want to see something cool? Everyone else was calling it a night, but I was in no hurry to get home, so I'd gone with him. The place was a wreck, but he'd set up one of the rooms with a small gasoline generator and had a radio and a lamp with a couple of chairs and a stash of booze and books. It looked like he spent a decent amount of time there. He tried to come on me too, and I had ended up telling him off and leaving. It was a long walk back. I had to give in and let him drive. It was the last time I spoke to him. I think I didn't tell anyone else about it, just kept him at arm's length after that. Was it Stefan? Had he figured out a way to insinuate himself into my life again? Why would he do this after all these years? My mind wandered, and I shook out a cigarette and lit it. Force of habit. Even in my mind, I guess, or whatever I was, or wherever I was, the connections I had to these objects was no longer something I doubted. But it was still a foreign feeling. They weren't as deep as those that I had placed in the rooms and nooks and galleries in the higher floors of myself. They were uncomfortable, jarring, and fleeting. They didn't fill my mind, rather they teased bits of the past up. It left me wondering why they were here. Taking a drag off the Camel Wide, I was hit with another flash of memory. Jeremy standing in his backyard over Dana. Sobbing in his backyard over Dana. They hadn't parted on good terms, and he had been wrecked when she went missing. I had always had a bit of a thing for Jeremy, but it wasn't reciprocated, so I left it alone. That was part of why I disliked her so much. I think she never deserved him. And then after she left him, she disappeared and he never got closure. Looking at the chair, I realized that one of the chairs that Stefan had in the house, it kept coming back to him. Once my mind had made the connection, Larry, that's what I'd nicknamed him to myself, Stefan Lear, always a bit strange after that incident at the abandoned house. Someone I kept my distance from. I sat in the chair then, almost without thinking, and was again overwhelmed with flashes of memory. Seeing Jeremy so birthed in his backyard, remembering the trip to his house with Stefan, the looks of Stefan gave Dana following her breakup with Jeremy, how he hadn't been around as much after the girl started disappearing, getting a bat and driving out to the forest and hiding my car after seeing his truck, the long walk trying not to get lost, hoping that I was wrong, hoping that I was right and could save them. No lights on in the house. Hearing something though, sneaking in the back door, the cracking of the floor and the sound of voices, trying to find them, the pounding of footsteps up the stairs, the struggle, shoving him down the stairs, following him down and seeing the room, seeing the girls, what remained of them, hitting him with the bat over and over and over until he wasn't making any noise anymore. Where was the screaming coming from? Looking up and seeing that Dana in her chains was still alive. Stefan no longer had a face. I was covered in blood and pieces of Stefan. Dana was screaming. Dana was alive. I came to bring her back, but then she'd bring him again. Dana was cowering beneath me, beaten and starved, and I brought the bat down on her head until she was no longer had a face. I took Stefan's keys from his pocket. I cleaned myself as best I could with the pump outside of the house. I drove his truck farther into the woods and I left it. I went home and burned my clothes and donated the bat to Goodwill. I got a new job and got away from my friends. They never found the girls. They never found Stefan, and somehow I managed to forget it all. I finished the Camel Wide and ground it out on the floor with the others. I went to my pillow punching room and took the bat and threw it into the horrible growth and sealed the door over with bricks and then paneling to hide it from my sight. I came out of my meditation so that I could tell you what I had found. I am the intruder that broke into my mind. I am the cancer that caused my own distress. I am the alien presence of my past shoved behind walls that managed to break itself free. And now, I am terrified of what else might be lurking in the shadows just past the edge of thought, building itself to break into my own awareness. What a great story.